Story 1. The Maintenance Man. I've been a railroad photographer for about 6 years. I know that sounds niche, and it is. Most people don't get it. But there's something deeply satisfying about capturing a 200-ton machine in motion. The light, the scale, the noise. It photographs beautifully if you know what you're doing. My handle online is Diesel and Dusk, and I have a modest following of maybe 4,000 people who are apparently just as weird about trains as I am. I want to preface this by saying I always do my research before a shoot. I look up timetables, I scout locations on Street View, I check if the area is private property. I'm not a trespasser. I mention this because what happened to me is something I've struggled to explain within the bounds of doing everything right. It was late October. I'd driven out to a stretch of active track about 40 minutes outside the city. A curved section that runs through a valley, which creates this incredible compression effect in photos where the train looks like it's emerging from the hills themselves. I'd shot there twice before without issue. The spot was technically on public land, right beside a small gravel access road that utility workers used. Nothing sketchy about it. I got there around 8 p.m. Sunset had already passed, but I wanted to catch the last of the blue hour and then go for some long exposure night shots once it got properly dark. I set up my tripod, checked my settings, and settled in with a thermos of coffee to wait for the 8:42 freight out of Columbus. The train came through right on time. I fired off about 300 frames, checked the results on the LCD. Honestly, some of the best shots I'd taken all year. I was buzzing with that quiet satisfaction that makes you forget how cold it is outside. Then I started packing up. That's when I noticed the light. About a quarter mile down the track, in the direction the train had just come from, there was a single stationary light. White, not quite the bluish tint of an LED. More yellowish, like a work lamp or an old flashlight. It was just sitting there on or near the tracks, not moving. I figured it was a maintenance worker, maybe someone who'd been doing track inspections and stopped when the freight came through. Totally plausible. I kept packing my gear, but I kept glancing at it. And after about 4 minutes, it still hadn't moved. Not even slightly. I'll be honest, my first instinct was professional curiosity. A stationary light source against a dark background is genuinely interesting to photograph. So I pulled out my camera, put on my 200mm lens, and zoomed in. There was a figure standing beside the light. Tall, wearing what looked like a reflective vest, head slightly bowed, like they were looking down at something on the tracks. I watched for another minute. Nothing changed. The figure didn't move. The light didn't move. I took a few frames, checked them on the back of my camera, and zoomed in on the screen to get a better look. The resolution was good enough. The figure was definitely a person. The vest was bright orange, but there was something wrong with the posture that I couldn't articulate. It wasn't the natural stillness of someone standing at rest. It was rigid, like a department store mannequin placed on the tracks, arms at an angle that looked effortful rather than relaxed. I had my phone out, about to call the non-emergency line just to let someone know there was a person standing motionless on the tracks at night when the light went out. Just off, instantly, like a switch. I stood there in the dark, staring at the spot where the figure had been. After about 30 seconds, my eyes started adjusting. The sky was clear, and there was enough ambient light to see the track stretching into the distance. The figure was gone. I don't mean they walked away while my eyes adjusted. I mean, there was simply nothing there. No silhouette moving in either direction. No crunch of gravel. No sound at all except the wind. Here's what makes this impossible to resolve cleanly. When I got home and processed my photos from the night, I went through the freight train shots first. There were a few frames taken just as the locomotive passed my position where I'd accidentally captured the background in the direction of where that light would later appear. In one of those frames, taken a full 12 minutes before I noticed the light, you can see a faint shape beside the tracks in the far background. It's blurry, it's distant, and it could easily be a post or a piece of equipment. I've shown it to 4 different people and gotten 4 different answers. But I know what I think it is. I haven't been back to that stretch of track. Not because I'm afraid, I tell myself. Just because the light doesn't hit the valley the same way in winter. I want to start by saying I'm not a superstitious person. I'm an electrician. I deal in cause and effect for a living. I'm writing this because I can't electrician my way out of what happened, and it's been eating at me for 8 months. Last February, I took an overnight train from Chicago to Pittsburgh for work. I do this run maybe twice a year. It's cheaper than flying. I can sleep in my seat, and I've always found train travel relaxing in a way that airports aren't. I boarded around 11 p.m. The car was maybe a third full. I found a window seat toward the back, put my bag in the overhead, and settled in. The guy across the aisle from me was already asleep with a neck pillow. A family of 4 was a few rows ahead. Normal overnight train stuff. We left the station on time. I watched the Chicago skyline fade out behind us, put my headphones in, and drifted off maybe 40 minutes into the trip. I woke up because of the cold. The window beside me was fogged at the edges, but the train's interior was notably colder than when I'd fallen asleep. Not broken heat or cold. More like someone had left a door open cold. I checked my phone. 2:17 a.m. The car was different. I don't mean it had changed physically. I mean the feeling of it was different. The family of 4 was gone. The guy with the neck pillow was gone. I was the only person I could see in the entire car. Now, people move around on overnight trains. Go to the dining car, use the bathroom, switch seats. I told myself that's what had happened. Then I noticed the man at the front of the car. He was sitting in the aisle seat of the very first row, facing forward, completely still. Dark coat, no bag that I could see. He hadn't been there before I fell asleep. I remember that car configuration clearly because I'd done what I always do when I board, which is a quick visual sweep of who's around me. Professional habit. He wasn't there before. Now he was. I watched him for probably 5 minutes. He never moved. Not a shoulder shift, not a head turn, nothing. I told myself he was just a heavy sleeper. Boarded at a stop I'd slept through, picked the front because he had an early exit coming up. All reasonable. I put my headphones back in and tried to sleep. I woke up again at 3:44 a.m. He was standing in the aisle, facing me. I don't know how long he'd been standing there. It was dark enough in the car that I couldn't make out his face clearly, just the general shape of him. He was close, maybe 7 or 8 rows away, and he was completely still. I sat up. He didn't react. I pulled my headphones out. I could hear the train, the rhythm of the tracks, the ventilation. Nothing else. I said, "Hey, you okay?" He turned and walked to the end of the car, through the door, and into the space between cars. I sat there for a while and then made a decision I still question. I followed him. The gap between cars was empty. I went through to the next car, the one behind mine, and there was no one in the aisle, just sleeping passengers. I walked the full length of it. Nothing. I went to find a conductor, found one 2 cars forward, described what I'd seen. She gave me the look you'd expect and told me the train had made 2 stops while I slept and that passengers come and go. She walked back to my car with me, did a check, noted it was fine, and went back to whatever conductors do at 3 a.m. I didn't sleep again the rest of the trip. Here's the thing I didn't tell the conductor because it sounds insane. When the man turned to walk away, I had about 2 seconds of him in partial profile against the window. There was enough ambient light from outside, we were passing some kind of lit facility, to see him clearly for just that moment. He didn't have a reflection in the window. I know how that sounds. I'm an electrician. I don't believe in things without explanations. But I was awake, sober, and 3 feet from that window, and there was no reflection. I've thought about it every night since. I keep arriving at the same place. Either I was more disoriented than I realized and misread what I saw, or something was in that car with me that shouldn't have been. I genuinely don't know which answer scares me more. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I worked night shifts at a regional rail hub for almost 3 years. And I am choosing to finally talk about what happened during my last month there because I've since moved, changed careers, and I'm far enough away that I don't particularly care if anyone recognizes the location. I won't name the station. I'll call it Hartwell. It's a mid-sized hub in the Northeast. Multiple platforms, some active freight lines, and a section of decommissioned platforms at the far end of the building that the station stopped using sometime in the early 90s. Platform 6 was one of those. Platform 6 was sealed off from the main concourse by a locked metal door. Beyond that door was a corridor, and then the old platform itself. A long, deteriorating cement ledge next to a set of tracks that hadn't seen a train in 30 years. The tracks were still there. They went nowhere useful. We used the corridor occasionally as a shortcut when moving equipment between certain parts of the building, and supervisors had master keys. Otherwise, nobody went down there. I want to be precise about the timeline. My strangeness with Platform 6 started about 6 weeks before I quit and happened on 4 separate occasions. The first time, I was doing a late equipment check alone, somewhere around 1:30 a.m. I unlocked the metal door, walked the corridor, verified the junction box I needed to check, and was heading back out when I heard what I can only describe as a departure announcement coming from the platform itself. Not from speakers in the main building bleeding through. From down there, a woman's voice, calm and procedural, announcing a departure for a train line I didn't recognize to a destination I'd never heard of. It lasted about 10 seconds and then cut off mid-sentence. I wrote it off. Old PA systems do weird things. Electrical ghosts in the wiring. I'm not the kind of person who needs something to be supernatural. The second time was 2 weeks later. Different night. Same reason to be in the corridor. This time it was footsteps. Long, steady, unhurried footsteps on the platform, coming from the far end toward me. Cement amplifies sound, so I could hear them clearly through the door at the end of the corridor. I stood there and waited. They got closer, then stopped, maybe 10 feet from the door by my estimate. I knocked on the door. Standard knock like you'd give if you thought someone was on the other side. Routine. 3 knocks came back, same rhythm as mine. I opened the door. The platform was empty. I walked its full length. There was nobody there, nowhere to hide, and the access from the tracks was blocked by a chain-link fence that hadn't been touched in years. The padlock was still rusted shut. Third time, I saw her. It was around 3 a.m. I'd been sent to retrieve a set of cable ties from the supply cabinet we kept in the corridor. I unlocked the door, took maybe 4 steps in, and stopped because there was a woman standing at the far end of the corridor in front of the platform door. She was facing away from me. Older, from what I could tell. Dark coat, silver hair, standing perfectly still. I called out. No response. I took 2 steps toward her, and she turned the corner through the platform door and was gone from my line of sight. I went after her. The platform was empty. Fence still locked. Tracks still empty. I went to my supervisor the next day and told him we might have a vagrant in the decommission section. I left out the parts that didn't make sense. He said he'd have it looked at. It was not looked at. The 4th time, I didn't see or hear anything unusual. But I want to tell you about it anyway, because it's the one that made me quit. I was alone in the corridor. It was a maintenance task, maybe 2 a.m. I was working quickly because I didn't want to be in there any longer than necessary, given the previous 3 incidents. I finished, packed my kit, and started walking back toward the main door. About halfway up the corridor, I stopped. I don't know why I stopped. I wasn't startled. I didn't hear anything. I just stopped walking. Some reflex I can't name made me go completely still. And then the air changed. That's the only way I know how to put it. The temperature in that corridor dropped fast enough that I could see my breath, which I hadn't been able to a moment before. And with the cold came a smell. Metallic, sharp, like old blood or rust or both. I stood there for what I think was about 20 seconds. Then it was gone. The temperature came back. The smell was gone. Normal corridor, normal night. I handed in my notice the following week. I told them it was for personal reasons. I've never told anyone the real reason. I don't work nights anymore, which people in my life have noticed and asked about. I tell them I needed better hours for my schedule. That's not what happened. 30-year-old tracks, a platform that goes nowhere, and 4 nights that still make me check the hallway at home before I turn the lights off. I don't have an explanation. I have a memory and a persistent feeling that whatever was on platform 6 knew I was there too.